Hi everyone, there are we again with a new Workplace Ninjas Live Ask Us Anything session. My name is Frans Oudendorp and together with my friend Ronny de Jong, we are hosting these monthly sessions. If you have suggestions about topics or have feedback, please feel free to reach out and let us know. The recording of this session will be posted on YouTube and all podcast platforms. So be aware that the video and the audio is recorded and published. Ronny, what do we have today?
Yeah, thanks for the brief introduction, Frans. Thank you everyone who is joining us. This fourth session of Live Ask Us Anything. And today we are talking about Windows Update. And to be more precise, we are talking about the recent announcements during Ignite about the Windows Update features. And actually, Windows Updates, it's affecting most people with using Windows devices. And actually, it's the infinite game of staying current. And today we have David Geyer from Microsoft. David, welcome. We are pleased to have you in this session. And perhaps, David, can you introduce yourself? We all know you are working for Microsoft. Yeah, please have a brief introduction for yourself before we continue.
Thank you, Ronnie. Yeah, I'm excited to be here and thank you for having me. I'm a program manager at Microsoft. I've been there for just over 20 years now, working some form of deployment that whole time. The last few years, I've been working in helping to build this Expedite feature we're going to talk about to help enable a little bit more, make it easier for some companies to move to the cloud because there's been that capability in Config Manager and on-prem deployment that's been missing in cloud deployment. So we wanted to help remove some of those blockers, and Expedite is one of those key things that we're doing to enable that. It turns out just a couple of weeks ago, I just moved over to the Microsoft Endpoint Manager team, and we'll be owning Windows updates from that perspective as well. So it's kind of a very smooth and interesting transition, and I'm super excited to be doing that. I get to learn a lot more about enterprise Windows updates management and really try to make that, continue to improve that space and work with various teams around the organization to enhance and improve that for the next few years, hopefully.
Okay, well, thanks for your introduction, David. Yeah, as mentioned at the start, there are so many Windows 10 devices or even devices which are utilizing the Windows Updates features. And yeah, it's always twofold. It's a necessity because staying current, yeah, we all know that. But for the other side, there are also sometimes some hassle or some challenges, particularly in enterprises. So therefore, it was interesting to cover this topic about the recent announcements, like you mentioned already, like Expedite, but also the other recent features mentioned, like driver and firmware management, known issue rollback, and reporting announcements in general. So yeah, that's great that we are seeing that Microsoft is heavily investing in the Windows Update feature set, but also the experience. And before we continue, especially with the Expedite feature, which I'm excited to, we were kicking off these sessions with a few statements. We are getting back during the session. And the statements for today, I've three for you. Just please answer them with a quick yes or short yes or no, if possible. And the first statement is Windows Updates for Business is finally enterprise ready today.
I think yes, depending on your enterprise needs.
Okay, that's an interesting one. The second statement is Windows Expedite, an evolution or a revolution of Windows Updates?
It's an evolution.
And the last one, that's less impact of quality of the updates themselves with the new Windows Update enhancements. It's more because the quality of the updates themselves are often questioned.
So So the way to think about that is that we want to help create the controls that allow you to measure and validate the quality in your organization, which builds on all the work that Microsoft is continually doing to improve the quality of the quality updates themselves. I can go into more details to what happens there, but primarily the features that we were announcing and discussing are focused on controls and management of deploying those updates.
Yeah, so actually it's more or less a yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, David. Yeah, that's what I mentioned. Windows updates is necessary to keep up and to preserve that our systems becoming vulnerable for threats from the outside, and that's why it's so important to have the Windows updates and working as flawlessly as possible. And one of the recent announcements made was Windows Expedite. We know the Windows updates as a services, Windows 10 mechanism. And the philosophy of Microsoft is not to have a lifecycle management of every 3 years with a new OS and replacing it. It's a constant update refresh cycle, which we have now every 6 months. And part of it, we have the Windows feature updates deployment. And on top of that, we have now the Windows Expedite feature. For those which are not familiar with the Windows Expedite feature, please can you explain what Windows Expedite entails?
Yeah, let me start my slideshow then. And we'll dive into the details not only of just high level what it is, but also how it works under the covers as well. So we're gonna become very transparent about expedited updates today. So we built expedited quality updates in Intune to enable organizations to go faster when you need to go faster. That we think often is going to be when those for special security updates come out that Microsoft suggests that you deploy faster than normal. But we also see scenarios where a certain LCU may have a fix that solves a problem with a line of business software or something else, and it may or may not be security related. You want to get that out as fast as possible. So we built Expedite with some characteristics that we thought would really help. One of the key things for us is that it starts installing right away. So instead of waiting for your daily Windows Update scan, we will either be able to send a push notification or have that device check in a little bit more frequently and discover that it needs to expedite something. And then it starts working as soon as possible. Downloads and installs faster than normal by not having all the normal user deferrals in space. Provides a familiar experience to our end users for managing restarts. So the dialogues are familiar, the experience is familiar, and they have a certain amount of control that you can control how much that is. And then Expedite will temporarily override the normal quality update settings on that device, enable that update to be expedited as quickly as possible, and then put that device automatically back to normal policy settings. So you don't have to go, for example, into your Windows 10 rings, change some settings, deploy that policy, wait for that to get out there, wait for devices to update, and then try to set those back to your normal settings, especially on the user experience side. So I have some data here, some data that we've seen through some trials internally and externally. The gray line talks about the average experience that we're seeing across enterprises in terms of adoption, the percentage of devices, for example, in an organization that get updated within a number of days. The compliance deadline is something that we use under the covers. And when used with a 2-day, 1-day compliance deadline, you can see a significant increase in the rate of devices that are updated on a daily basis. And then with Expedited, we apply that compliance deadline, but with the start installing right away, you can actually see in the first couple of days an even faster adoption. And then eventually the compliance deadline experience that we're using, those curves merge for the rest of the deployment.
David, we already have a few questions, and probably it's about the topic we already mentioned. one of the questions: will we be able to expedite any or all Windows Updates for Business available updates if we feel like we need?
So initially, we're only going to be able to support security updates. That does include some of those out-of-band security updates that occur. So any security update for Windows 10 will be able to expedite initially. We are definitely aware of the value of the non-security updates as well. Like I talked about, the line of business fixes, for example, often will initially come in what we call a C-week release, or one of those non-critical releases. And so we want to be able to expedite those as well. And so it's something we're looking at. And depending on customer feedback and some of the things that we explore and look into, we may be able to expand Expedite even further.
And the next question, and hopefully that will give the answer to Stefan, who asked that question. If we expedite an update and a few days later we notice that an update is causing issues, do we use the regular uninstall update in Windows Updates for Business? And if so, will it only uninstall that KB?
So today that you would use the existing uninstall capabilities. And so there's no changes to that experience that Expedite is bringing along with it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So it's actually only focusing on the security updates, David, you mentioned before.
That's right.
Further, you mentioned that Expedite needs to be faster compared to the regular deployment cycles, including the deadlines and the compliance reporting. How much faster is the Expedite feature capability over the regular deployment rings? Can you provide us some details about it?
Yeah, so especially in the first 2 to 3 days, we are seeing 2 to 3 times more adoption the first few days with an expedited update. And that's even compared to using some very short deadlines with the compliance deadline. So the orange line here, for example, is using a 2-day quality deadline with a 1-day grace period, which is really, really fast. It doesn't give users a lot of time to manage their update. And so most people, and what we generally recommend actually through the Windows 10 adoption velocity white paper that we published last year, is a 3-day deadline with a 2-day grace period. And then depending on what you're using, if you're actually using longer periods for deadlines and grace periods, that orange line, for example, would move further down a little bit. So it really depends on what your existing settings are in your organization.
Yeah, but actually what you're saying, it's way more faster, 2 to 3 times, and it gives you an additional diversity or a tool to deploy the critical updates way more faster to your endpoints, and make sure that those vulnerabilities are not applicable to your endpoints.
Exactly. And then it makes it easy as well, because you only have to create that policy when needed, and then you can rely on it to automatically fall back. And then, as I'll describe again in a little bit, but once devices meet that expedited update level, then they are no longer expedited. So then the next quality update comes along and automatically uses the normal settings. Exactly. So it makes it a lot easier to do that without having to set settings forward and back and manage that. And that's a mess.
So actually you can respect your current deployment settings, your deployment process, your deployment ranks, and on top of that you can differentiate based on the out-of-band or the security updates which are released by Microsoft.
Exactly.
One of the questions, and that might be an interesting one, to elaborate a bit more about how Expedite exactly works, is the question of will clients, the endpoints, then check in for WPP policies more often? Can you explain how Expedite works in the root more or less?
Yeah. I actually have a little bit of an architecture diagram in a couple of slides, but the sneak peek on that is that we are deploying through Windows Update to all Windows Update connected devices a package called the Update Health Tools, and it puts a client in place. And so that is doing a its own check for, do I need to do any expedited updates? It's a very lightweight call. It's not through the Windows Update stack. And so we're able to kind of control the frequency of that, make it go, for example, a little bit faster right around Patch Tuesday, and then back off during most of the rest of the month when updates are not generally released by Microsoft, as well as use a push notification. And that was the key reason why we put this client in place, is under certain circumstances, we're able to use a Windows notification system push and go directly to the device. And so we need to be able to have a client to talk to and to register for that notification.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you right, David, then in parallel of the regular Windows Update agent, we have a lightweight agent, which is called the Update Health Agent, which is actually facilitating the expediting process, giving you the ability to have the additional notification and retrieving or pulling the policy, make sure that you are ready or to receive the Expedite policy.
Exactly. And lightweight is definitely a key phrase there. That was our intent, was to make it exactly that. And it facilitates and enables and actually works with the Windows Update stack in order to create the Expedite experience.
Okay. And in regards to that lightweight agent, is it built in the Windows image, or should we have additional deployment of that agent? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so it's not currently built into the Windows client or the Windows image. It is deployed and targeted to all Windows Update connected devices. And so we are taking the burden, if you will, of deploying that client to devices. And so it should automatically be installed, and it should only wake up for enterprise devices that are connected with our WPB deployment service system.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, we're talking about Windows 10. We are talking about
that's right,
several versions of Windows 10. Which versions or which builds Expedite you are supporting, and is it also related to the SKUs?
Yeah, so Expedite will be supported on Pro, Enterprise, and Education SKUs. And initially, we are supporting 1909 and newer builds, and we will continue to support them, any build that is still under current servicing. So once devices reach end of servicing, we'll continue to support them for a little bit longer in case you want to use Expedite to try to get devices to the latest and last quality update available for that build prior to hopefully updating it to the latest feature update.
Okay, yeah. And as mentioned, it's Windows 10. Are there any plans to also support other kind of updates, which consuming or having security related updates like Microsoft 365 apps, for example? Or is it completely different channel, different technology?
Yeah, so I think the way to look at that is that we're starting to look at other Windows updates that we could potentially support with Expedite initially, and that would probably take us a little while to get that completely done if we're able to pull all that together. Other types of updates that are under the M365 umbrella would be something we would look at after that, and it's not currently something we're spending a lot of time yet looking at because we've got plenty on our plate. But it's worth, we have that on our radar as well.
Okay. Just from make it easy to deploy our updates because we have multiple kind of updates as mentioned, and yeah, just to make it easy ease that process to make sure that our endpoints are current, but for the other side to reduce the labor or the effort from an IT pro.
Yes.
That's actually the catch we're trying to solve.
Yeah. I think there's a lot we can do as well with looking at recognizing that Windows updates on devices is not limited to a quality update. And how do we then coordinate and think about how different updates that have been approved for a device can be more efficiently delivered to that device and provide a better end user experience. So we have some thought in that direction as well. And that would be some things that we want to try to bring to the table if we're able to, again, pull that together.
Yeah. And yeah, you already mentioned about the Expedite. It's introduced in the MEM console. Is it more or less the same as we used to with the regular Windows Update rings or the feature update rings? Is that the way how the quality or the expediting update feature is introduced in the MEM console?
It is definitely in the same area. It's not under Windows 10 update rings today. It's a standalone tab for quality updates or Blade, and I can actually show that experience now. That was a nice segue. So when you create a quality update profile with Expedite, you'll have an experience that looks like this. We will show the last 3 security updates, and you can select from those. And what this does is this tells us what kind of the compliance requirement is, and if a device doesn't meet that requirement, whether or not to expedite the device. And so we're using the release date as the primary way of expressing what you're selecting, because we wanted to make sure that it was real easy to have an experience where you can select the update you want for across a group of devices that are on different Windows 10 builds. And as you know, across different builds, we have different KB numbers, and we also have different dot revisions. And so those common ways of referring to quality updates didn't work very well when they spanned across multiple builds. But what does work very well is because they're released on the same day together, is that release date. And we're also using this terminology that we like to use that indicates it's the 04B security update, right? So that means that the April 2nd Tuesday of the month is what the B refers to. Yeah. And so that's also a really great way of talking about these. And we start to see out of band updates. They will say, like, for example, .04 OOB. And so you can recognize those. And when we are able to support non-security updates, then, for example, you're likely to see like a .04C in that list. And so what we do is we use that information when we check on the device. If the device already has that version or something newer, we don't even ask it to expedite. And so we don't put the user through the expedited experience because they already have that version available. And that's also how we make sure once it is expedited that we don't continue to expedite it. And then the other control that we have available is the number of days to wait before the restart is enforced. And so that can be set between 0 and 2 days. And so that gives the end user some time to look through to go through the reboot experience where they get to, which I'll show the slides in a little bit, but their familiar dialogue where you can schedule a restart right now, or ask it to, try to restart at the end of the day or during outside of active hours when I'm not working. And that gives the user some control over when that restart occurs, but then you also have the control over how long they have before they do that, because this is an expedited update. There's a reason you need this to go faster. And so we limit the amount of days to 2 days, which I think is actually usually going to be plenty. I do want to caution about 0 days. 0 days does create that, like, boy, this thing needs to get installed as soon as possible, no matter what the impact is to end user productivity, because it will restart in the middle of the day. So on a 0 day grace period here, the device will give the user, as soon as it reaches restart ready to restart, it will give a dialogue right away. And I don't remember exactly, but you either get 15 minutes or 4 hours before that device is going to restart. So there could be those cases where you really need to go that fast. But we do want you to be thoughtful about using that, because we all want our end users to be happy and not calling help desk too often.
That's a fair point, I think. But from the other side, what you mentioned, if it's a 0 day, then your continuous or your business process and the existence of it that's the most important thing. But for the other end, it's a continuous balancing act from security versus productivity. But I believe with these controls, you have at least the tools, to push out your critical security updates on your terms and finding the right balance for and that what you mentioned in the introduction with the statements I mentioned is the Windows Update for Business, is it finally enterprise ready? It's also depending on the needs of your organization.
Exactly. That was the thinking we had was we recognize that different enterprises have different balances between enforcement and user experience, and we want to try to provide the right range of controls to allow those organizations to fine tune to their needs as well as the characteristics of that specific update.
Yeah, there was one question from Stefan, which is mentioning that in the screenshot you showed why we see twice the March update. I believe it was because of the multiple build versions, or is it just? Oh,
I got a screenshot from a bug a little while ago. So that's actually just a bug in the system that we have fixed by now.
Okay, well, at least it's sharp.
Good eye.
Yeah.
Good catch. All right, so
yes, go ahead, please.
Oh yeah, so I talked about this a little bit about how this works, behind the scenes. So initially, you'll submit your policy request, and one of the questions I saw was, we'll be able to do this through like the Graph API and PowerShell, and that is something that is coming, and coming fairly soon, I believe. And so, our primary interface is going to be through Intune, as well as, but there are the APIs can be made available to developers, both in enterprises and otherwise. And so that policy submission is going to be through our WPN deployment service. As we process the Expedite policy there, we'll either send a push notification or update some blob storage, where that client is going to be able to pick up that notification that says it is time to go and expedite a specific update. And so this WPN DS client is part of that update health tools package that we talked about earlier. So we will then set the deadline policy through group policy on that device, and then request the Windows Update client do a scan for updates. We'll do a normal scan at that point, and the applicable update will be downloaded to the device and installed and restart. While that's going on, our client is monitoring that. In addition to the telemetry sent from this client, we're sending some telemetry here, so we can keep an eye on that. And as soon as that Expedite is completed, or if there's any errors or failures, either way, we want to have a very robust restore the GPO policy back to the original settings, and then exit the process.
David, you mentioned API. One of the questions of Stefan a little bit earlier was, will this feature come to the new deployment service, especially for the API part, so we can skip using the UI? And that is what you said, what you were saying, huh?
Exactly, absolutely. It is. It's an integral component of the Windows Update for Business deployment service, and just one of the features that service supports and will support.
Great.
Yeah.
I think it gives a nice overview of what the architecture is within the new service that is coming. There is a public preview mentioned already. You wrote a blog on that.
Yes.
Is there already some news that you can share on that public preview?
It is coming as soon as I can possibly get it to be released. We are quality driven, and there are a couple of things that we're looking at right now that will decide exactly when it is released. If not in the next week, then it should be in the next release cycle for Intune.
Yeah, and there will be a blog on it. So if people want
Yes.
to participate, they can read that blog and participate that way.
Yes, we will update the blog post that exists from Ignite on the Windows IT Pro blog. We will update that, and then we will also amplify that through various other social media channels, and try to make the splash as big as possible when it's released, so that as many people are notified as we can.
Yeah, and if we know, we will also notify it through our social media channels. So that we will spin that wheel again. Yeah.
Yeah, you're on my list to find out, or for me to.
We will definitely amplify the message, David, when it's ready to reach out to all the community, because I'm sure that many of organizations are willing to participate in this, because so. Yeah, because what I mentioned, it's important to stay current, and definitely what you explained also with architecture and the way how Expedite policy find the ways to the endpoints. Yeah, that's great. How fast it can be in case if it necessarily. Impressive.
Right. Well, let's go see if I can get through the last little bit here, and then we can get to more questions. So the user experience that I mentioned is the familiar Windows Update reboot experience. So you get a toast notification and initially that is not very invasive. That gives you those options. Choose a time, restart tonight automatically, or I'm ready now. Let's just get it done. And then over time, those dialogues become a little bit more modal. Same options. Communicates that your organization has done this as an important update. These are standard dialogues. As we get closer to that enforced restart, it clarifies when that's going to happen, so you have a little bit more time to make sure that you're getting ready. You know, our intent is that users save their data, that they get a chance to reboot when it is least impactful to them. Whether it's convenient or not, depends on some of those settings and how long they waited. And then eventually we do the final restart notification. If you do a quick pass around some of the reporting, so there will be an errors report in Intune. You'll be able to see the sets of expedited devices that you have or policies that you have and how many errors are in those policies. When you select and look inside those policies, you'll be able to see which devices have errors. And then what we're doing is we're building on what we started with feature updates and providing this alert message, which is a little bit more of a user-friendly explanation of what the error is and not just dropping the Win32 error code. We should be providing that in addition to the alert message, but when you select that alert message, there's some additional information as well. We're providing a little bit deeper explanation of what the description of that error is right there within the tool, and a recommendation for how to resolve it. And this is something we feel very strongly about, that we really want to strengthen and continue to enhance beyond what I'm sharing here. That, okay, you've told me what the problem is, or you've told me this device is not updating because it has a problem. Now what do I do with it? We really want to help close the loop on now what do I do with it, and make that very well informed, as well as thorough, and hopefully more and more functional, if you will. There will also be a summary report, just like the feature updates does today, where you'll see the summary of how many devices are done, have error states, are in progress, and then just some basic information. But some of the key things that we're also doing here with this update state and update substate, if you haven't seen the feature update report, is that we're describing exactly where the device is in the process. And so we're going to be sharing states within the server processing. We're validating, for example, we've made the offer ready, whether or not the offer has been received by the client, which is when we transition into the client side states. Is it downloading? Is it installing? Is it ready to restart? Or is it install complete? And also potentially the failures in that progress. So we're really trying to provide a really clear picture of where each device in that policy is in the process of updating.
I think that's valuable because, as mentioned, the Expedite feature is used to push out as quickly as possible the security updates or the 0 days. And if you're not sure the mechanism is working properly, how you can assure that how they find the endpoint? So that's
Yeah,
that's
and
great.
you know,
We have that.
right. And when you're having it go even faster, you're probably even more interested in making sure that it's working. And is it getting there fast enough? Are there any issues? So having the rich data available so you can monitor and track the progress of the update, is super valuable there. And then I would say that, hey, these are the reports for a quality update that happens to be expedited. So there might be a notion of we might use these reports elsewhere when we can pull them together.
Yeah, that's not only for this Expedite feature, but in general, it's great to have enhanced Windows Update reporting to make sure that that you're compliant, for example, because that many IT pros, IT admins are being asked, okay, what are the KPIs, how we are doing, how well we are patched, and how do the Windows updates find their way through our endpoints into the organization. So yeah, these are the ears and the eyes almost to give those insights.
And I think that this is really the tip of the iceberg of what we are going to try to provide in terms of improving reporting awareness and data insights about Windows updates within the Intune product.
Yeah. Another question, interesting one, is how the lightweight client is being monitored. Is it part of the policies or a part of the Expedite feature reporting?
So there are some of the update states and substates where we get that status or that update state directly from that client. But we are looking at, for the client state, we're looking at a combination of telemetry from that client as well as the Windows Update telemetry. So since the Windows Update client is doing the downloading, installing, we're primarily using that particular telemetry in order to provide those states. But the offer received update substate is specifically coming, for example, from that client.
Yeah. That's why it's an interesting question, because normally we have only the Windows Update engine. We have to make sure it's working properly. In the past, we knew we had some challenges over there, but now you have an additional client additional to the Windows Update engine. So we have to make sure that both agents are running in a good state to make sure that the Expedite feature is working as expected.
Right, and that's where the benefit of keeping it lightweight does wonders for improving reliability and quality.
Yeah.
One question that came in top of my mind, David. We're looking at Expedite quality updates within Endpoint Manager. What about extending it to Endpoint Manager, Config Manager?
So the current thinking is that we won't do that because Config Manager already has a capability, the deploy as soon as possible capability to speed up deployment of quality updates. That said, that's kind of the current positioning, customer feedback, as well as seeing how well this feature works. Once it's out there, could change opinions, and I'm interested in feedback since I'm probably one that would help decide and plan that direction. So I'd love to hear more at some time if people are interested in seeing us port this over to Config Manager.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's also depending on what kind of organization you are. Are you a co-managed? Are you a config manager a customer, or are you a modern customer and relying completely on WPN? And I think, but that's a kind of on assumption is the strategy Microsoft push out is cloud first. So I can imagine that we are focusing on the WPN developments, make it more mature and more enterprise ready, and also encouraging customers, particularly the config manager customers, to move to co-management, and thus using also the WPN capabilities, including Expedite we are discussing today. So
yeah, there's a lot of wins for the cloud. There's a lot of reasons we're investing there, and we encourage customers to use the cloud when it fits their needs. We also recognize there are going to be ongoing requirements and needs for on-prem management, and so we want to continue to make that keep that system working very well, and have Microsoft Endpoint Manager as a whole, be a world-class enterprise management tool across the board. So it's not one or the other. As you said, we have there's a lot of good reasons why for many customers that cloud first is going to be a great solution, provide lower cost, lower infrastructure costs, and allow for us to even provide more innovation on deployment methodologies and techniques. But on-prem is going to be around for a long time as well. And so we want to make sure that continues to be a good system for customers that need it.
Yeah, you want to serve both type of customers and spreading your effort equally. Although we know we all focus on cloud, but there's still a majority of customers which still hybrid. So yeah, we have to ask over there as well. And I think that's a great duty for us, like Microsoft yourself, the community. We are participating and advocating these kind of developments and announcements, which might putting them to their mind, and hopefully they will adopting these new announcements the sooner the later.
Exactly, absolutely.
Okay.
So I have one more thing that I was going to explain about Expedite.
Yeah,
if I have time.
Yeah, sure.
It's one of the more advanced things, but it's one of the things that we did a lot of thinking about. And so we talk about this as providing the latest applicable update. So we have several goals with the experience for end devices. We want to make sure that we are able to install the Expedite update, even if it was normally deferred. So if you have your Windows Quality Update deferral, set to 15, 30 days or something, when you go to Expedite, you don't want to find out that we're unable to install it because it's deferred, right? And so that was kind of goal number one. We also thought about this as keeping devices as secure as possible. And that comes into play because an Expedite policy can live for more than just 30 days. One use case that we thought might be, that actually some customers talked to us about, is leaving that policy in place as kind of a min version for the organization. And so you might leave it there for 6 months, 8 months, until like a new, really critical security update comes along that you need to create as a new min version. And so we wanted to make sure that if we were expediting a device, for example, one that had maybe been in a drawer or on vacation for a couple of months, as secure as possible when we were expediting that device. So that might mean installing the latest available quality update. We also were thinking about the end user experience. We want to minimize those reboots. So one of the things that would really kind of be unfortunate for an end user, and there's still some corner cases where this could happen, we're definitely trying to minimize it, is they get this Expedite experience, they have this restart happen in the middle of the day because they didn't manage it and they didn't do it overnight. And then the device does its normal daily Windows update scan, and there's a newer update available. And so it downloads it, and the next day, the user gets another reboot prompt. This one, it would not be as fast and would give them more time to do that reboot, but they're already a little bit sensitive because they had that enforced restart the previous day. And they're like, wait, what, another restart? So we absolutely want to minimize that as much as we can. But in doing all those things, we also did not want to install an update that you as an administrator did not expect it to be installed yet. So if we are doing an update like a few months out and expediting a device, We don't want to expedite something that the rest of your organization has deferred, because you haven't really said that's okay to go to your organization. And we didn't want those customers or those devices to essentially leapfrog ahead of where you expected your organization to be. So we developed this latest applicable update approach that does that. And so to illustrate that, we have the scenario where you've expedited an update on February 11th of 2020. Which we would call the 2B release. And so normally when we expedite that device, the device that's on the January update, the 1B update, we're going to ignore the deferral, and we're going to expedite and install the 2B update and deploy that to that device. Later on, if another device comes online a few days after the 3B release, the March 10th, and you have a 10-day deferral on that device, within those first 10 days, that deferral is actually going to be honored. So that device is going to be expedited to 2B as well. And that makes sure that we don't update that update that's not expected to be installed yet. Now, on March, if the device comes online and is expedited as of March 20th or 25th, which is past that 10-day deferral, then the 3B update will be offered to that device. And then finally, if you are, for example, the device comes online a few days after the 4B release on 4/14, the deferral is still honored, but we're going to apply the 3B update because that's the latest applicable to that device, because this one is still deferred. And then the 4B would be just like in this case as well. The 4B would be offered to that device on a normal daily scan after the 10-day deferral.
Yeah.
That's where you can get in that corner case. If that device expedites on the 9th day of the deferral, and then the next day the deferral expires, then you might get 4B offered the next day. So we couldn't eliminate all the corner cases, but we thought that this would be the best way to find that balance for end users as well as administrators who want the devices to be as current as possible.
Yeah. And all these improvements are leading to reducing the impact for your end users, keeping them productive, and preserve reboots unnecessarily. So that's great, David. Also respecting to the time we have left. These are wonderful insights, and thank you for elaborating a bit more on Windows Expedite. At least for me, it's way more clear how Expedite works and what the benefit is of Expedite feature. At least definitely a great add-on on the WPN, the Windows Update feature updates to improve the deployment, eases the deployment, and getting back to one of the statements, Windows Update for Business is enterprise ready. I think with all these enhancements and improvements we discussed today, we're on a good direction, and I'm positively say it's a yes. Once again, many thanks, David, for joining us. I'd like to wrap it up, and the final words are for Frans.
Yes, everyone, thank you. The next event of our Workplace Ninjas Netherlands community is on the 11th of May, where Nico Ziek will give a webinar about the top 5 biggest technical hiccups when moving to the cloud. The next session that was announced, the session of Peter Dalmans, is postponed because of postponed to the 22nd of June because of King's Day in the Netherlands next week. So that's a bank holiday. So we are all off then. Our next live Ask Us Anything recording will be on the 18th of May from 4 to 5 p.m. Central European Summertime, about endpoint analytics. One of the Microsoft program managers will join us in that session to answer the questions and perhaps give a sneak peek about the feature roadmap. So be there. For now, I say thank you all, and until the 18th of May in a new version of Live Ask Us Anything. See you then. Bye bye.